Okay, let's just get this out of the way right off the bat. Today, we are completely shattering the myth that your intellect is just a single fixed number stamped on your forehead at birth. No way. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive deep and unpack how psychologists actually measure and understand human cognitive capability. It's an absolutely fascinating journey, and honestly, it goes way beyond what you might have seen in pop culture or those random online quizzes. We really want to teach this in depth today, so let's jump right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start off by moving beyond the traditional IQ score, look at the evolution of intelligence theories, walk through the actual clinical assessment process, break down modern tests and how they're interpreted, explore the multi-method approach, and finish up with a critical evaluation.
Section 1. Beyond the IQ score. It is way more than just a number.
So, we are starting our journey by totally redefining what intelligence assessment actually means in contemporary psychology. The absolute crucial point here is that this is a broad, systematic evaluation. We're looking at your unique cognitive profile, right? Your reasoning abilities, your memory processes, your capacity to learn new things, and crucially, your adaptive performance. Now, what does that actually mean in the real world? Well, it means asking, how well do you handle everyday life? Can you manage your finances? Can you figure out a tricky bus schedule or adapt to a sudden, unexpected change in your routine? Contemporary psychologists recognize that we aren't just assigning a random number to a person. We're really trying to understand their functional abilities to help with real-world things like diagnosis, educational planning, or even career counseling.
Section 2. Theories of Intelligence. Let's look at how our understanding has evolved.
You know, historically, our understanding of intelligence has shifted dramatically. Think of it like a giant puzzle that took decades to put together. In the first era, Spearman proposed the theory of general intelligence, or the G factor. He basically argued that if you perform well in one cognitive domain, you'll probably perform well in others because of this one common underlying mental ability. But then Era 2 comes along, and Thurstone challenges that entirely. He argued for multiple primary mental abilities, things like verbal comprehension, memory, and numerical ability, showing that our brains are frankly much more multidimensional. Moving into Era 3, Gardner and Sternberg widened the net even further. Gardner proposed multiple intelligences, suggesting traditional academic measures completely miss things like musical, interpersonal, or spatial intelligence. Sternberg brought us the triarchic theory, emphasizing analytical, creative, and practical intelligence. This chronological evolution ultimately acts as a build-up to a sort of grand unified theory in Era 4, the contemporary Cattell-Horn-Carroll, or CHC model. This is the gold standard today. It integrates those earlier theories, conceptualizing intelligence as having a general factor, but also several broad cognitive abilities like working memory, processing speed, and visual spatial skills.
Now, Raymond Cattell, who was a major contributor to that CHC model, really refined our understanding by splitting intelligence into two very distinct types. First up, fluid intelligence. This is your raw, on-the-fly, problem-solving adaptability. It's exactly how you handle a completely unfamiliar situation or a novel problem where you literally have zero prior experience to rely on. On the exact opposite side, we have crystallized intelligence. Think of this as your personal library. It's the accumulated knowledge and learning you've acquired through education, culture, and just life experience. Interestingly enough, fluid intelligence actually peaks in young adulthood and then slowly declines, while crystallized intelligence, that accumulated knowledge, continues to grow well into old age. To put that into perspective, just think of fluid intelligence as the raw processing power of a computer and crystallized intelligence as all the files and data saved on the hard drive. Both are absolutely essential, but they function very differently over the course of your life.
Section 3. The Clinical Assessment Process, from Referral to Recommendation.
All right, so now that we've got the theory down, how does a psychologist actually put this into practice in the real world? Because I promise you, this isn't just about handing someone a test booklet and starting a stopwatch. It is a rigorous 6-step process. Step 1 is always the referral question. The psychologist has to know exactly why they're assessing you. Is it for suspected learning difficulties, giftedness, maybe neuropsychological concerns? Step 2 is gathering background information. We're talking interviews, medical history, school records. We absolutely need context. Step 3 is test selection, choosing the right tool based on age, language, and culture. But step 4, man, this is where the magic happens: administration and observation. A psychologist learns just as much from watching a child give up in frustration after 30 seconds as they do from seeing a perfect score on a math problem. Your behavior during testing provides just as much valuable clinical information as the scores themselves. Then comes step 5, scoring and interpretation, where we look at the patterns of strengths and weaknesses. And finally, step 6, integration and recommendations, where the whole shebang is pulled together to help plan treatment or educational accommodations.
Section 4. Modern Tests and Interpretation, the Tools of the Trade.
So what are the actual tools psychologists pull out of their toolbox during step 3 of that clinical process? Well, they rely on highly specialized instruments tailored for different life stages. The Stanford Binet is one of the oldest and most famous, evaluating multiple areas like reasoning and working memory across general ages. It might ask subjects to solve block puzzles or define vocabulary words. Then we have the Wechsler scales, which are incredibly prominent today. The WAIS is tailored specifically for adults, looking really deeply at how quickly you process visual information or comprehend complex vocabulary. For kids, we use the WISC, and for preschoolers, the WPSI. The major takeaway here is that these aren't just one-size-fits-all tests. Not at all. They are carefully designed to produce incredibly detailed, age-appropriate cognitive profiles rather than just spitting out a single generalized global estimate.
Because we get those richly detailed profiles, modern interpretation has fundamentally changed the game. We just aren't looking at a basic global IQ score anymore. Instead, psychologists are seeking to answer very specific questions. What are your specific cognitive strengths? What are your weaknesses? And most importantly, how do these strengths and weaknesses affect your daily functioning? For example, let's say you have a perfectly average overall IQ. But when we actually look at your profile, we find you have exceptionally strong verbal abilities but significantly weak working memory skills. That discrepancy, that is a goldmine of clinical information. It perfectly explains why a brilliant student might be absolutely amazing at a fast-paced debate but completely fail at remembering a 3-step instruction from their teacher. This profile-oriented approach is what truly explains everyday functioning and ultimately guides the best interventions.
Section 5. The Multi-Method Assessment Approach. Putting together the complete picture.
Okay, so how do we actually apply all this data ethically and responsibly? On the application side, the impact is immense. In education, it identifies giftedness or pinpoints learning disabilities. Clinically and neuropsychologically, it helps diagnose developmental disorders or track cognitive decline from things like a traumatic brain injury or dementia. However, we absolutely must address the massive limitations here. Intelligence tests are heavily influenced by cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic factors. A low score might not mean low intelligence at all. I mean, it could literally just be a reflection of intense anxiety, fatigue, poor motivation, or a linguistic barrier during the test. Plus, these tests have major blind spots. They do not fully capture incredible human qualities like creativity, wisdom, resilience, or emotional intelligence. We have to be incredibly careful not to let a single test score define a person's entire potential.
And that brings us to the absolute golden rule of psychological assessment. IQ alone is never, ever enough. To avoid those limitations we just talked about, contemporary psychology relies on what we call a multi-method approach. It requires integrating the raw test scores with a clinical interview, rigorous behavioral observation, the patient's full case history, a mental status examination, and finally, expert clinical judgment. Think about it. A student with an average IQ might be failing school because of emotional or environmental factors, while a student with lower achievement scores might actually have immense intellectual potential that's just masked by test anxiety. You need every single variable in this equation to uncover the truth.
If you only take one thing away from this explainer today, make it this. It is a huge common misconception that intelligence tests measure intelligence directly, the way a scale measures weight. They don't. They measure your performance on selected cognitive tasks on a given Tuesday under very, very specific testing conditions. That's it. From that performance, psychologists simply infer intellectual functioning. Therefore, the psychologist's true role is never merely to just report a score to you. Their actual job is to thoroughly understand the meaning of that assessment within the broader, incredibly complex context of your entire life. Teaching this in depth really highlights why human context is everything.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. Knowing what we now know about the underlying structure, the importance of clinical observation, those detailed cognitive profiles, and of course, the very real limitations of these assessments, can a standardized test ever truly capture the full depth of human wisdom, creativity, and resilience? It's a massive question, and it's one that keeps psychologists striving to improve their methods every single day. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the fascinating world of intelligence assessment. Keep questioning, keep learning, and always remember, you are so much more than just a number.